The morning sun painted the Thompsons' kitchen in golden hues as Sarah carefully measured coffee grounds for her favorite French press. She treasured these quiet mornings, the house still, her husband Mike away on his business trip, and nothing but the soft hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. As the coffee brewed, filling the air with rich aroma, she mentally planned her day ahead at the local Veterans Support Center where she worked as a physical therapist. The peaceful routine shattered with 3 sharp pounds on the front door that seemed to shake the entire house. Sarah glanced at the clock. Just past 8 a.m. Too early for deliveries. The heavy knocking repeated, more urgent this time, each slam echoing through the hallway. Setting down her coffee mug with trembling hands, she moved toward the door, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. Through the frosted glass sidelight, 3 hulking silhouettes waited on her porch. Sarah's trained eyes immediately noticed their stiff postures, the bulk at their hips suggesting holstered weapons. Years of military service had taught her to read body language like a second language, and these men radiated aggression. They wore matching black tactical vests emblazoned with HOA enforcement patches that looked surprisingly professional from a distance. Property inspection. Open up. The command thundered through the door, causing Sarah to instinctively step back. The leader's voice carried the authoritative tone of someone used to being obeyed immediately. She could see them shifting their weight, hands resting near their equipment belts where flashlights, batons, and what appeared to be pepper spray hung like a police officer's duty belt. Sarah's heart raced, but not from fear. From the familiar adrenaline response her Special Forces training had ingrained. Every detail became sharp and clear. The way the morning light glinted off their badges, the scuffed boots beneath their cargo pants, the way the tallest one kept checking his watch impatiently. Her mind catalogued potential escape routes, defensive positions, and makeshift weapons within reach, all while maintaining an outwardly calm demeanor. "I need to see proper identification," she called through the door, her voice steady despite the situation. The men exchanged glances before the leader held up what appeared to be an official-looking document pressed against the glass. From her angle, she could make out a seal and signatures, but something felt wrong. Real HOA representatives didn't arrive in tactical gear demanding immediate entry like SWAT team members. As a former Green Beret medic, Sarah had spent countless hours assessing threats in hostile environments. These men's behavior patterns raised every red flag in her mental checklist. Their positioning was clearly tactical, one covering the door while another moved toward the side of the house, the third maintaining overwatch. This wasn't standard procedure for checking if someone's grass was too long or their fence needed painting. She moved to the home security panel discreetly mounted behind the kitchen wall, her fingers hovering over the panic button. The system, installed by Mike last year after a series of home invasions in the area, featured cameras covering every angle of their property, reinforced locks, and direct connection to their security company and local police. Sarah had initially thought it excessive, but now she silently thanked her husband's foresight. The pounding resumed, more violent this time, rattling the door in its frame. "We're coming in," the leader shouted. "You've got multiple violations, overgrown lawn, unauthorized fence color, and that shed in your backyard isn't approved. Open the door immediately or we're forced to enter under HOA emergency authority." Sarah's training kicked in as she processed the absurdity of their claims. Their house was meticulously maintained. Mike had just trimmed the hedges 2 days ago. The fence was the same approved color as when they'd moved in 3 years earlier, and the garden shed had been properly approved through the Architectural Review Committee. These weren't enforcement officers. They were something far more dangerous. Moving with practiced silence, she positioned herself where she could see the front door while remaining out of direct line of sight. Her phone was within arm's reach, ready to call for backup. The men outside continued their intimidating display, their shadows growing larger against the frosted glass as they pressed closer to the entrance. Sarah knew she had precious few seconds to decide her next move as the situation balanced on a knife's edge between de-escalation and dangerous confrontation. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she watched the leader, Walsh, produce what claimed to be an official HOA document. He pressed it firmly against the window, tapping the glass insistently with his knuckle. Through the translucent surface, she could make out fancy lettering at the top and what appeared to be a long list of supposed infractions. The other two men flanked the door, their hands hovering near their utility belts with practiced nonchalance. "Ma'am, we need you to understand the seriousness of this situation," Walsh called out, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality that sent warning bells ringing in Sarah's mind. "We're authorized by HOA Statute 47B to enter and inspect properties with critical violations. You have exactly 1 minute to comply before we exercise our legal authority." Sarah moved closer to the door, careful to stay at an angle where she wouldn't be visible through the sidelight. Her bare feet made no sound on the cool hardwood as she studied the document more carefully. The paper looked legitimate at first glance, letterhead, stamps, even what appeared to be notary marks. But her attention snagged on the date. It was supposedly issued 3 days ago, yet she'd received no prior notice in her mailbox, on her email, or on the HOA website, where all official communications were posted. "I'm calling our HOA president right now," she announced loudly, already pulling out her phone. "Mrs. Peterson will verify whether you have authorization to be here." This statement triggered an immediate reaction. Walsh's shoulders tensed visibly, and he exchanged quick glances with his companions. "That won't be necessary, ma'am. Mrs. Peterson is fully aware of our presence here today." But Sarah was already dialing. Her fingers moved swiftly across the screen, selecting Doris Peterson's number from her contacts. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Outside, she noticed the men moving again, the taller one edging toward the side gate, while the stockier one positioned himself closer to the front window. "Don't waste everyone's time with phone calls," Walsh insisted, his tone hardening. "We have backup units on their way. You're only making this harder on yourself by refusing to cooperate with official HOA business." Sarah's military training kicked into high gear. The mention of backup units wasn't standard HOA language. It sounded like police or military terminology. Her eyes scanned the immediate area, noting that her neighbor's curtains were still drawn, and the retired couple across the street had likely left for their morning walk. The isolation of the moment wasn't coincidental. "Hello, Sarah." Doris Peterson's familiar voice finally came through the phone, sounding genuinely confused. "Is everything all right, dear?" "Mrs. Peterson, there are 3 men at my door claiming to be HOA enforcement. They're demanding entry for inspections. Did you authorize any enforcement team to come to my house today?" There was a pause, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Enforcement team? No, Sarah. We don't have any such thing. The landscaping committee does drive-bys for major issues, but we would never." "Are you saying there are men at your door right now?" Walsh apparently overheard the conversation because he immediately produced another document, pressing it to the glass. "This supersedes local authority," he declared loudly. "We operate under regional HOA Federation guidelines. Your local president doesn't have clearance for these upper-level enforcement actions." The absurdity of this claim would have been laughable if the situation weren't so tense. Sarah's fingers tightened around her phone as Mrs. Peterson's voice grew urgent. "Sarah, I'm calling the police right now. Lock your doors and don't let anyone in. We've never had regional enforcement teams. This isn't real HOA protocol." The leader must have sensed the conversation wasn't going in their favor. His tone shifted from authoritative to threatening. "Ma'am, you're currently in violation of cooperative compliance requirements. We're giving you a final 10-second warning to open this door voluntarily before we're forced to breach for emergency inspection." Sarah's heart pounded as she processed this escalation. Her years of service had taught her to distinguish between legitimate authority and dangerous posturing. These men weren't here for grass height or fence colors. Their tactical positioning, weapons, and aggressive tactics suggested something far more sinister. She needed to make a decision that would protect her home and possibly save her life. Behind her, the coffee maker beeped innocently, a stark reminder of how quickly a normal morning had transformed into a potential crisis. Outside, Walsh raised his hand, beginning to count down from 10 with his fingers. Each number felt like a hammer blow, marking time until the situation would explode into something far more dangerous than words and threats at her doorstep. Sarah's finger hovered over the security system panel as Walsh's countdown reached 7. Her breath came steady and measured despite the adrenaline surging through her body. Years of handling crisis situations had taught her that panic was the enemy of good decisions. She pressed the sequence of buttons that would transform her home from a vulnerable target into a secure fortress. The electronic locks on all doors and windows engaged simultaneously with a series of soft clicks that echoed through the house. The system's automated voice announced, "Perimeter secure. All entry points locked." Through the sidelight, Sarah watched Walsh's hand freeze mid-count, his confidence wavering as he realized his forceful entry had just become exponentially more difficult. Emergency security shutters began descending over the main windows, triggered by the advanced protocol Mike had insisted they install. The mechanical hum filled the air as reinforced steel plates lowered inch by inch, transforming the bright morning light into a protective dimness. Walsh took a step back, his authority challenged by the home's unexpected defenses. "What are you doing? This is obstruction of official duties." Walsh's voice took on a note of genuine concern, though he tried to maintain his commanding tone. His companions shifted nervously, clearly unprepared for a homeowner who could essentially turn their house into a bunker at the touch of a button. Sarah moved to the security monitor built into the kitchen wall, grateful that Mike's tech enthusiasm had led him to install multiple cameras around their property. The high-definition feeds showed her every angle. The front door where Walsh still stood with his document, the side gate where the taller man was attempting to jimmy the lock, and the back door where the third man had quietly positioned himself. "I'm informing you that I'm contacting law enforcement," Sarah announced through the intercom system, her voice carrying to all 3 intruders. "The actual authorities will arrive shortly. Any attempt to enter this property will be recorded on multiple cameras with timestamps and uploaded to secure cloud storage. You're being monitored and documented." The intercom crackled with Walsh's frustrated response. "We are law enforcement. We have jurisdiction under HOA Regulation 47B, which supersedes local police authority in matters of property violations. Standing down now might prevent additional charges when we do get inside." Sarah had to admire the audacity of his bluff, even as she dialed 911 with practiced efficiency. Her eyes never left the security monitors as she spoke to the emergency operator. "This is Sarah Thompson at 4256 Maple Grove Lane. 3 armed men claiming to be HOA enforcement are attempting to force entry into my home. They're wearing tactical gear and making threats. I've activated my security system and am currently safe inside." The operator's professional tone steadied her further. "Units are dispatched, ma'am. Officers will arrive in approximately 6 minutes. Stay on the line and keep monitoring the suspect's movements." Through the cameras, Sarah watched the men's behavior change once they realized police were en route. Walsh stepped back from the door, speaking in hushed tones to his companions. They were clearly debating their next move, gesturing toward their vehicles parked down the street, a fact Sarah had already noted and reported to the operator. "They're moving toward the side of the house," Sarah narrated into the phone. "The tall one is carrying what looks like a crowbar. They're attempting to find vulnerable entry points." Her military training kicked in as she mentally prepared for potential scenarios. The house's security system was excellent, but no system was impenetrable. She moved to her study where Mike kept their emergency supplies, retrieving the lockbox key from its hidden location. Inside, her legally registered Glock 19 waited with its tactical light attachment and magazine nearby. "Ma'am, are you trained with firearms?" the operator asked, sensing her movement through her narration. "Yes, I'm a military veteran with current civilian carry permits," Sarah replied, maintaining her calm. "I'm taking defensive position only. I have no intention of using force. unless they breached the home. The security cameras captured Walsh growing increasingly agitated. He was now speaking into his phone, likely calling his supposed backup, or perhaps realizing their scheme was falling apart. Sarah noted how his story kept changing. First HOA enforcement, then regional authority, now federal jurisdiction. Each lie dug their hole. The distant sirens grew louder with each passing second, transforming from a faint whistle into a mounting chorus of justice approaching the Maple Grove Lane neighborhood. Sarah watched through her security monitors as Walsh's carefully constructed facade began to fracture like glass under pressure. His aggressive posture melted into nervous shifting, and his companions exchanged worried glances that betrayed their mounting fear. "Officers, please identify yourselves," Walsh suddenly called out, attempting to switch tactics as the sirens neared. He straightened his tactical vest and adjusted his HOA enforcement badge with shaking hands. "We're conducting an authorized property inspection. We have full authority to be here." 3 police cruisers rounded the corner, their lights painting the quiet suburban street in alternating flashes of red and blue. Sarah felt relief wash over her as the cavalry arrived, though she maintained her vigilant position. Through the monitor, she watched as 4 uniformed officers emerged from their vehicles, hands resting casually on their duty belts in a stance that spoke of readiness without aggression. "Sir, we need you to step away from the door," the lead officer commanded. Officer Mike Chen, according to the nameplate Sarah could just make out through the cameras, moved with the confident efficiency of a veteran cop. His partner, a younger officer named Rodriguez according to her badge, circled toward the side where the tall intruder was still attempting to look for entry points. Walsh's response was a masterclass in attempted deception. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. We're regional HOA enforcement, badge numbers 1842, 1843, and 1844. We were executing a critical property inspection when the resident became hostile and activated these security measures. We were just about to call for police backup when you arrived." Sarah pressed the intercom button again. "Officers, this is Sarah Thompson. I'm the homeowner. I have 911 dispatch on the line. These men have been threatening to force entry into my home. They claim to be HOA enforcement, but I've spoken with our HOA president, and no such team exists. They're not authorized to be here." Officer Chen's experienced eyes scanned the 3 men, noting their tactical gear, weapons, and perfectly matched uniforms. Something about their setup nagged at his instincts. "I'm going to need to verify your credentials, gentlemen. Please show me your badges and identification." The stockier man fumbled in his pocket, producing what looked like a professional badge holder. Walsh maintained his composure better, smoothly presenting his credentials with a flourish that seemed practiced. The tall one, still at the side of the house, looked increasingly uncomfortable as Officer Rodriguez approached him. "These look homemade," Rodriguez noted, examining the badges under the bright morning sun. "The printing quality is inconsistent, and the weight isn't right for official badges. These aren't Department of Homeland Security standard, like most HOA enforcement teams use." This comment struck like lightning. Walsh's face darkened, and for the first time, real fear flickered across his features. "We work under a different authorization system. Our regional director can verify." "Sir, I've been a police officer for 12 years, and I've worked with every legitimate enforcement agency in this city," Chen interrupted. "There's no regional HOA enforcement team operating in our jurisdiction. Why don't you start by telling us your real names and what you're actually doing here?" The situation was rapidly unraveling for the fake agents. Walsh glanced toward his vehicle, clearly calculating escape routes. The stocky man's hand twitched toward his utility belt, causing both officers to adjust their stance slightly, hands moving closer to their weapons in a subtle but unmistakable warning. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Officer Chen," the lead cop spoke through the intercom. "You can come to the door if you feel safe. We have the situation under control out here. These men will be detained for questioning." Sarah quickly secured her weapon in the lockbox and moved toward the front door, noting how the morning had transformed from peaceful coffee time to a full police response in less than 30 minutes. Through the window, she watched as backup arrived. 2 more police cars pulling up, bringing the total to 6 officers surrounding her property. The tall man made a sudden movement toward the fence, apparently deciding to run. Officer Rodriguez reacted instantly, calling out, "Stop! Police!" as she and another officer moved to intercept. The would-be runner raised his hand slowly, recognizing the futility of escape with 6 trained law enforcement officers on scene. "We have a right to inspect this property." Walsh tried one last desperate assertion of authority. "This woman is interfering with official HOA business. She's the one who should be arrested." Officer Chen turned to face him fully, his patience finally exhausted. "Sir, impersonating officials, trespassing with intent to intimidate, and possessing counterfeit identification are serious crimes. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the Miranda rights continued, Sarah deactivated her security system and opened the door. The early morning air felt crisp against her skin after the controlled environment inside. She stepped onto her porch, watching as her quiet neighborhood transformed into a crime scene, complete with yellow tape and curious neighbors peeking from their windows. Walsh's shoulders slumped as the reality of his situation finally sank in. The other 2 men stood with their hands cuffed behind their backs, the weight of their deception pulling their heads down in defeat. The morning sun, now higher in the sky, cast long shadows across the scene, marking the end of their elaborate con game. Police officers moved with practiced efficiency around Sarah's front yard, securing the scene while neighbors gathered at the edges of the yellow tape that now marked off her property. Detective James Morrison arrived in an unmarked sedan, his weathered face showing 30 years of experience as he surveyed the captured suspects. Walsh and his 2 accomplices sat in the back of separate police cruisers, their false authority stripped away with each passing minute. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Detective Morrison." He introduced himself with a firm handshake. "We need to understand exactly what happened here. These men have been running quite an operation, and you might be the first victim to successfully stop them." Sarah invited the detective inside, where they sat at her kitchen table. The forgotten coffee maker still held her morning brew, now cold and bitter. As she recounted the events, Morrison took detailed notes, occasionally nodding with recognition when she described Walsh's tactics. "The fake credentials are impressive," Morrison explained, showing her photos taken from the men's vehicle. "They've got official-looking documents, proper seals, even forged signatures from city officials. Someone put serious money into creating these props." The investigation unfolded layer by layer like peeling an onion. Walsh's real name was Gregory Peterson. He'd worked as a security guard for a local mall chain before being fired for aggressive behavior toward customers. His accomplices, James Miller and Robert Hayes, were former colleagues who'd joined him in this elaborate scheme. They'd stolen letterhead from a legitimate HOA management company and used a home printer to create official-looking documents. "We've received 4 other reports in the past month," Detective Morrison revealed. 3 homeowners paid what they thought were urgent fines. Mrs. Nguyen on Oak Street paid them $2,500 to avoid having her illegal garden removed. The Johnsons on Pine Avenue handed over $1,800 for unauthorized roof repairs. Only you stood your ground. The scope of their operation expanded as investigators searched their vehicle. Inside, they found more forged documents, a printer setup, and detailed files on neighborhood properties. Walsh had studied public records, noting when homeowners traveled, when they lived alone, and when they might be most vulnerable to intimidation. They targeted houses where they observed only one person at home, Morrison explained. They knew that solo homeowners might be more easily intimidated. Your military background and security system threw them off their game. As the morning progressed, Walsh began talking, hoping for a lighter sentence. His story emerged in fragments. He'd lost his security job after pushing too hard with authority. The thrill of power had become addictive, and when legitimate channels closed, he created his own. The HOA enforcement idea came from watching how easily some homeowners became anxious about violation notices. He studied psychology online, one officer reported, learned pressure tactics and authority manipulation. The tactical gear was borrowed. The badges were printed at a specialty shop he told was creating props for a film. Even the timing. Early morning before coffee, when people are groggy and less likely to question authority. The fake agents had prepared for various scenarios, but hadn't anticipated encountering a former Green Beret. Sarah's training had given her the composure to resist their pressure tactics and the presence of mind to use her security system effectively. Her actions likely prevented them from victimizing more homeowners. "You saved a lot of people from being scammed," Detective Morrison said with genuine admiration. "Most victims feel too embarrassed to report these incidents. They pay up just to make it go away." By noon, the detective's phone had lit up with calls from other residents who'd noticed unusual HOA enforcement activity in recent weeks. Walsh and his crew had been casing the neighborhood for at least 3 months, building their confidence with each successful intimidation. Real HOA President Doris Peterson arrived at Sarah's house with documentation proving no such enforcement team existed. "We've never authorized anyone to carry weapons or force entry," she declared firmly. "Our landscaping committee leaves polite notices, never threats." These men exploited people's fear of authority and desire to follow rules. As investigators continued their work, they uncovered Walsh's notes on Sarah's house. Home shows clear military/law enforcement awareness. Husband absent for business trip. Good security system noted. Approach with caution. Homeowner may have training. Despite his warning notes, he proceeded anyway, underestimating her preparedness. The 3 men would face multiple charges: impersonating officials, trespassing, harassment, theft by deception, and illegal weapons possession. Walsh, as the ringleader, faced additional charges for conspiracy and fraud. Their elaborate scheme, designed to exploit honest homeowners' respect for authority, had finally met its match. Sometimes the best defense is having the right preparation, Sarah reflected as Detective Morrison packed up his notes. "My husband thought the security system was overkill, but today it proved its worth." Training and technology working together stopped these con artists in their tracks. The courthouse buzzed with anticipation as the trial of Walsh and his associates began 2 months after the incident. Sarah sat calmly in the witness box, her posture straight and confident as the prosecutor guided her through her testimony. The jury leaned forward, captivated by her clear, detailed account of how she'd faced down the fake HOA enforcers. "Miss Thompson, can you describe the moment you realized these men weren't legitimate authorities?" the prosecutor asked, pacing before the witness stand. "Their behavior patterns didn't match any official enforcement training I'd encountered," Sarah replied. "They used military positioning tactics but seemed unfamiliar with actual protocol. When I questioned their credentials, they became aggressive rather than patient, a clear red flag in legitimate law enforcement." Defense attorney Harrison attempted to paint Walsh and his accomplices as misunderstood businessmen who'd simply taken their HOA responsibilities too seriously. His cross-examination focused on Sarah's military background, trying to suggest her paranoid training had led her to overreact to normal inspection procedures. "Isn't it true, Miss Thompson, that your combat experience made you unusually suspicious of authority figures?" Harrison pressed during cross-examination. Sarah's response was measured and precise. "My training taught me to recognize both legitimate authority and intimidation tactics. These men used textbook intimidation, time pressure, threat escalation, false documentation, and weaponry that no HOA would authorize. Anyone would feel threatened by 3 armed men demanding entry based on fabricated violations." The prosecution's case grew stronger with each witness. Mrs. Nguyen testified about paying $2,500 for an imaginary garden violation, her voice trembling as she described how Walsh had threatened to seize her property if she didn't comply immediately. The elderly Johnson couple explained how they'd emptied their savings to pay $1,800 for their supposed illegal roof, too frightened to question the men's authority. Detective Morrison presented the physical evidence: forged documents, stolen letterhead, detailed neighborhood surveillance notes, and the fake enforcement badges. Crime scene photos showed Walsh's car trunk filled with official-looking forms and a portable printer, essentially a mobile fraud factory. The defendants ran a sophisticated con operation, Morrison testified. They studied their marks, timed their approaches for maximum vulnerability, and created believable props to support their deception. Their mistake was targeting someone with the training to see through their act. Expert testimony from Dr. Elena Martinez, a psychology professor specializing in authority manipulation, explained how the defendants exploited common human psychology. Most people have an inherent respect for authority figures. These men weaponized that respect through what we call compliance psychology. They created urgency, displayed symbols of power, and left no time for critical thinking. The defense struggled to counter the mounting evidence. During his testimony, Walsh claimed they'd been hired by a regional oversight committee to crack down on HOA violations, but couldn't produce any documentation of this mysterious organization's existence. His story shifted multiple times, each version more desperate than the last. Security footage from neighboring cameras proved devastating to the defense. One video showed Hayes practicing his official voice while standing at another neighbor's door 2 weeks before targeting Sarah. Another captured Walsh discussing their earnings and planning their next targets. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood to read the verdicts. Guilty on all counts. Walsh received 8 years for racketeering, fraud, and impersonating officials. Hayes and Miller each got 5 years as accomplices. The judge noted during sentencing that their sophisticated and predatory operation warranted the maximum penalty to protect the community. "You preyed on people's trust and respect for authority," Judge Matthews declared. "Your victims weren't just financial casualties. They were left feeling violated in their own homes, afraid to answer their doors, questioning their ability to discern truth from deception." Following the trial, Sarah worked with the city to implement new verification systems for HOA communications. All legitimate enforcement actions would now require pre-notification, proper identification checks, and never involve armed personnel. The city also established a hotline for residents to verify any HOA-related claims instantly. The Real HOA revised its policies, adding clear language about legitimate enforcement practices. They partnered with local law enforcement to provide educational sessions for residents about recognizing and responding to potential scams. Sarah's experience became a cautionary tale and teaching tool, helping protect other communities from similar schemes. 2 weeks after the sentencing, Sarah received a handwritten note from Mrs. Nguyen. "Thank you for your bravery. Because of you, I sleep peacefully again." The elderly couple, the Johnsons, stopped by with homemade cookies, saying her actions had given them hope that justice could prevail over intimidation. The case made national news, with security experts citing it as an example of how home security systems and personal preparedness could prevent targeted fraud. Walsh's sophisticated operation had met its match in Sarah's combination of training, technology, and determination to protect her home and community. The Maple Grove Lane community transformed in the months following the trial. Sarah returned home from the courthouse to find her entire street lined with yellow ribbons tied around trees, a silent but powerful message of solidarity from her neighbors. What had begun as an isolated incident had sparked a neighborhood revolution of awareness and unity. Mike returned from his business trip 2 days after the sentencing, immediately taking Sarah in his arms at the airport. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered, fighting back tears. "When I think about what could have happened if you weren't you," his voice trailed off, but his gratitude filled the air between them. The next week, he arranged for a security system upgrade. Installing additional cameras and motion sensors, though they both knew Sarah's greatest defense wasn't electronic. It was her training, instincts, and courage. The Thompson House became an informal community center for self-defense awareness. Every Saturday morning, Sarah led a free workshop in her backyard, teaching basic security awareness to neighbors of all ages. Retired Mr. Williams from across the street, who'd always kept to himself, now participated eagerly, sharing his own experiences as a former bank security guard. The best security system is a vigilant neighbor, Sarah often reminded her students, echoing the philosophy that had saved her own home. Within 3 months, Maple Grove Lane boasted the most organized neighborhood watch program in the city, with residents communicating through a private app that allowed instant sharing of suspicious activities. The HOA's transformation was equally remarkable. President Doris Peterson, shaken by Walsh's exploitation of her organization's name, resigned to make way for fresh leadership. New President Maria Rodriguez, a former police officer herself, implemented revolutionary changes. Every HOA document now carried a QR code linking to verified digital copies, and all enforcement actions required photo identification from the homeowner before proceeding. Local law enforcement praised the community's proactive stance. Officer Chen, who'd responded to Sarah's call that fateful morning, presented her with a civilian commendation at a city council meeting. Mrs. Thompson didn't just protect her home, he declared. She protected the integrity of our community's trust in authority figures. The ripple effects extended beyond Maple Grove Lane. Other HOAs across the state adopted similar verification protocols, and the story became a case study in property law courses at the local university. Law professor David Kumar used Sarah's experience to teach students about fraudulent authority claims and the importance of citizens knowing their rights. Walsh's former victims found healing through Sarah's example. The Johnsons received full restitution from the seized assets of the fake enforcers, while Mrs. Nguyen joined Sarah's security workshops, eventually becoming an instructor herself. "I won't be anyone's victim again," Nguyen declared proudly during her first class, her accent thick but her voice unwavering. 6 months after the trial, the city unveiled a new community alert system inspired by Sarah's ordeal. The Verify Before Comply app allowed residents to instantly check the legitimacy of any official-looking visitor. Within its first month, it helped expose 3 other attempted scams across different neighborhoods, proving that Walsh's operation wasn't unique. Sarah returned to her work at the Veterans Support Center with renewed purpose, finding that her story resonated powerfully with other service members transitioning to civilian life. "Your military training never leaves you," she'd tell them. "It's not about living in fear. It's about staying aware enough to protect what matters." The annual HOA meeting that spring felt different. Where once residents had gathered to complain about petty issues, they now celebrated their community's resilience. Maria Rodriguez presented a plaque to Sarah, "To our guardian neighbor, for teaching us that courage comes in many forms." The room erupted in applause as Sarah stood, her husband Mike beaming proudly beside her. As the seasons changed, so did the character of Maple Grove Lane. Children played safely on sidewalks monitored by caring neighbors. Elderly residents no longer feared answering their doors. Property values rose as word spread about the community's proactive security measures and tight-knit bonds. Walsh and his associates remained behind bars, their sophisticated scheme dismantled and their victims compensated. The fake credentials they'd crafted were displayed in a police academy museum as teaching tools, serving as a reminder that authority must be earned through integrity, not counterfeited through intimidation.